The meat was good. Yeah, that's pulawa meat. Eh? You understand why CSC was headquartered here. So, please, frequent this city. It's quite close to home. Well, according to some specialists, they argue that the meat that is derived from cattle that graze on grass is not as rich as cattle that graze on other alternatives. So you find the best meat here, even if you give me 4 pieces of meat, I can tell you this one is from Mat North, or this one is from Mat South. Texture is very different, taste is very different. Even the goats here.
Thank you. I believe you had a wonderful lunch. Did you enjoy your lunch? Yes. Do you still need some more?
Tomorrow.
Or tomorrow? In Crystal, we say we save smiles, so we need to continue seeing smiles so that we know that you guys, you really enjoyed your lunch and we can continue to save your smiles tomorrow again. We are proceeding with our winter school with our theme, Supply Chain Fraud, Risk and Resilience. We had a presentation from Mr. Bethel Kwanzekele Lechwa, and also from Laina Njuru. Mr. Bethel touched on common audit logs, and Ms. Laina Njuru touched on fraud types and risks. So we need to move on. Remuneration and fraud, which is going to be presented by Mr. Ndomiso Slanda. So I'm going to call upon Mr. Ndomiso Slanda to come and do a presentation on this topic. Let's give Mr. Ndomiso Slanda a round of applause. I will have to also give you a profile of Mr. Davis Ndomiso Slanda. He is management and labor consultant. He worked as a high school teacher for several years, teaching in several schools in Matabeleland North, Midlands, and Matabeleland South. In addition, he worked for Bulawayo, both as a group human resource manager, and later human resource manager for United Workers Bulawayo. His last formal job was human resource executive for Bulawayo Municipal Commercial Undertaking. And since 1998, he has been into the management and labor consulting, specializing in labor relations and labor law, working in East and Central and Southern African countries. Amongst several qualifications, Mr. Slanda is a holder of LLB, London University, diplomas in advanced finance, labor relations, strategic management, and advanced labor law. Mr. Slanda chairs 3 national employment councils in Zimbabwe, and he has done consultants work for a number of national employment council. Further, Mr. Slanda has worked with trade unions and employers associations in the regions, especially the areas of projects, wage negotiation, and dispute resolution. So I would like to welcome Mr. Davis Ndomiso Slanda to the podium so that you can do your
Is my voice loud and clear?
Very loud.
Good. With technology, I've always learned to carry voice amplifiers so that I can push my voice up if need arises. But I think my voice is loud enough. When I got an email that you were requesting me to give a talk, I was actually at Mimosa, and I said to my PA, but I'm very busy. And she said, but it's not a complex topic. I said, Pretty, why are you saying it's not a complex topic? He says, I know you won't actually be given headaches by the topic. I then came back over the weekend looked at the email, looked at the topic and what was happening, and I realized that we were talking about familiar ground. 2011, 2012, I was human capital consultant consulting for a South African company on a Zambian project. I ended up finding myself doubling up as a commercial manager as well. It was quite an easy fraud that actually occurred very quickly. I was seated next to the construction manager, and somebody brought in certificates to be acquitted so that the clients got paid. And I knew the golden rule, never sign any document from subordinates when you're in a meeting. So my boss signed. Then the guy pushed the file to me for a second signature. I just closed the file, and then I said, I'll come back to you. He came again and said, it's urgent, the banks are closing, some of the payments are due today. I said, my friend, wait a minute, they can be paid tomorrow. Soon after the meeting, I looked at those certificates which were supposed to be acquitted. And of interest to me was one certificate which was actually saying a job was done in an area where I had driven the day before and there was nothing other than clearing the ground. I then said to my boss, can we drive? So when we got to the side to stop the car, I said, look what we have signed, you'll be fired. He said, but this guy said they cleared this thing, I thought it had been done. I said, there's something fishy about this. That very afternoon, I drove from Chingola to Kitwe on the Copper Belt, those who know Zambia. I then talked to the manager. I said, something fishy is happening here. And to cut a long story short, already 11 million rands has gone out fraudulently. We only managed to recover about 9 million. And some guys ended up in jail. That's the supply chain world that we live in. The rest could take a whole day explaining what happened. When I was asked to give a talk on human capital management, managing the supply chain from risk and ensuring resilience, there were a few things that I noted. I'm in human resources. I write job descriptions almost every month. But I want to confess that it's so difficult to write a supply chain job description. Because what one organization calls supply chain is not necessarily what the next organization calls supply chain. Others will give flowery titles like shared services and all the other animals that come in. The broad character of supply chain management profession makes management of fraud and risk very difficult and complex, as each organization's circumstances are different. That's where we begin. It is not easy to come up with a document or a policy or SOPs that would actually talk to every organization. Each organization has its own unique character. I try to say, what is covering? What does it cover? I'm not an expert in your area, but you realize that I've identified some of the things, and I might have left quite a number. I'm not an expert in that area. But you're looking at distribution, you're looking at issues of quality control, you're looking at procurement and purchasing, strategic resources, materials management, logistics, receiving, warehousing, amongst others. Am I very far? I'm on the mark. I've written job descriptions, but like I said, from every organization you look at, the identity is different. And the client says, do me a policy document for this thing. You find you have to do a totally different thing. You don't have a generic template that you can use from client A to client B because of the identities that actually we find. Today's challenges, a large chunk of supply chain management is technology-based. And the available platforms are not completely foolproof and perfect. They are capable of being manipulated and being bypassed by individuals at various stages, the presence of soft hacking applications worsens the situation. We're working in an age of technology. So much is happening with technology. You will talk of this package. Sorry if there's somebody who came in and sold you a package. I'll tell you there's no package that is foolproof. All packages are capable of being hacked in one way or the other, and they're capable of being manipulated. We have IT fundis here as well, isn't it? I'm not an IT fundi, but I'm not a fool. In fact, I'm also a specialist in technology and law. Remember, law is moving into technology now. Commercial law went online the rest of the world in 2014. We were one of those few countries that are behind. So I've actually had the privilege of actually appreciating a number of platforms that are used. And also I've actually had a good appreciation of professional or ethical hacking. Almost all platforms are capable of being hacked in one way or the other. So that's one of our biggest problems. We are open to the challenges that are related to fraud. The risks are always there. So what it means is that your IT guys should always be a step ahead. If they are not a step ahead, then you have a problem. And sorry to those who did IT at college. I would say your biggest brains in that area from a human resources point of view, it's not a guy who did IT at college. It's a guy who did your Microsoft, a guy who did Cisco and some of those animals which are really hands-on. These are the guys that you want to be at your beck and call all the time. You don't want a guy who will actually go into the server and marvel what the server looks like. You want a guy who is going to walk there hands-on. What else is there? Transparency International places Zimbabwe at 157 out of 180 countries on the corruption. It should be Corruption Perception Index for 2022. It might have changed, but the last time I checked, that's where we were. The issue of the index accuracy is debatable and is not part of my presentation, but the truth is that our supply chain profession also contributes to the perception index Zimbabwe is sitting in. I know politicians don't want to hear about this perception index. I'm not a politician, and I will never be one. It's too late now. But that's where we are, 157. Some people even put us on a worse position. I'm sure you have seen some of the indexes putting us worse off than that. But still 157 is not good enough out of 180. What then is the contribution of human capital management in the management of supply chain fraud and risk? The IT guys to be a step ahead. Ensure everybody in the management team is computer literate. Even if it is the MD, make sure you lock his office and he goes and actually takes his lessons. Take away that secretary from him so that he survives on his own. Coursera and Udemy have got very good programs that can help even those who are so busy actually acquire the skills to actually survive in the age of technology. Human capital management policies and procedures. Every organization has to have robust human capital management policies and procedures that ensure that the system brings in people of integrity into the organization. That's your starting point. In many organizations, go there and say, I'm offering to review your policies and procedures or put policies and procedures in place. The first people to shoot it down, the first people who don't want it are managers, because they are worried that the policies and procedures will close loopholes. Sorry for saying that. People look at self-interest, and you say policies and procedures, we are not interested. The company has been running as it is. We don't need those. We have SOPs. SOPs created by you, and you left those loopholes untouched. But all we are saying is, invest in policies and procedures. And when you guys fire each other over fraud, you then start looking for people like me. And you expect me to perform miracles when the case is sitting on policies and procedures with a lot of loopholes. How do I bail you out? All I can tell you is settle with the guy. Because if you litigate, your policies and procedures have a lot of loopholes that cannot actually save your organization, that cannot help you exit the individual at no cost. That's why you need those robust policies and procedures. And bringing in people of integrity. Let the system check. You can go on internet. These days we even go through Facebook. Look at the kind of character the person is from his Facebook page. I mean, the guy says, I live in Zimbabwe, I work in Dubai. Already there is a disconnect there. I was educated at the University of Texas. And when he comes for the interview, he doesn't tell us about those things that happened there. Surely you should realize that issues of integrity are not part of you. Remember, what was social media yesterday is no longer social media. It's business tools, isn't it? Your Facebook is a business tool, your WhatsApp and all the other things, and all your other platforms. Then, it's a long story of how you bring in the right people. It's an investment the organization has to make. It could take us a morning to talk about that as a whole. The job descriptions are detailed to avoid corrupt activities, such as job overlaps, and that create room for fraud. Simple job description which says who keeps the safe keys, and which clearly says the second key goes to the bank. 10,000 stolen from the safe over the weekend. The finance manager has the key, the accountant has got the key, and then you want somebody to assist you to dismiss the accountant because he's the subordinate. But at law, both of them are potential criminals, and they're both potential thieves. You cannot secure a conviction in a criminal court because at the gate it shows that both vehicles drove into the company over the weekend. So there is no proof beyond reasonable doubt on who opened the safe. If you take fingerprints, the safe has both their fingerprints because they open it from time to time. And the fingerprint system can't tell you which fingers were above the other and the other below. And then you come to someone, I know I'm the boss, help me get rid of this guy. How do I compromise my integrity over something that I say you can't do it? So I'll tell you, count your losses and carry on, guys. Maria Biwa, but we don't know who stole the money. Maria Chonchi. That's what I'll say to you. A job description must be properly written, very detailed. Because when you charge somebody, our starting point when you come to me for representation, I'm saying, let's look at the job description. What are the express conditions of his contract? Then we can deal with the implied. But ethical issues that are dismissible are clearly spelled out in the policies document. There are certain ethical issues that need to be disclosed. I'm employing a relative. I'm transacting with a relative. I'm transacting with a cousin. I'm with old boys. I do a lot of things with old boys. Nobody went to Fletcher here, isn't it? That's a rare occasion. I don't believe there's no Fletcher boy. I think supply chain is something wrong. Well, that's why there's no Fletcher boy. Right. Ethical issues. Clearly document them in your policies and procedures. What things should I disclose before I transact? What gives management? I remember one time we were consolidating policies and procedures for ZCDC when the gold mines were coming together. The gifts management policy took us 5 hours to conclude. 5 hours, almost the whole day. Because in your business, you get gifts, isn't it? Which gift goes under the table? Which gift gets cleared? And you get it twice, the third time, fourth time, becomes a habit. What do? Performance management programs should keep tabs on activities of employees so as to detect deviation early. Very often we run away from performance management programs that are detailed. One time, one organization asked us to put out a performance management program for it. We went on and did a really comprehensive program. The CEO said, it's fine. Here we're very busy. TTRA one-page sheet. We said, one page. Oh, good, very good, excellent. That's what we gave him. But what does it tell you? Remember, such a performance review process cannot even stand legal scrutiny. The judge won't even be willing to see it because what is good and what is very good, what is poor, what is satisfactory, what is unsatisfactory. Have that robust performance management program which will probe your people, which will expose where there are problems and you deal with them. Do lifestyle audits. Very important. You can tell a guy living beyond his means. There will be a slip up somewhere. And ask the question, where is it beginning? Where is it coming from? Also have a well-managed whistleblower system. Why am I saying well-managed? I manage whistleblower systems for some organizations. They bring the documents, all of them, to me. You need to have a skill of picking those that can be picked up. There is no need for the organization to spend energies following that so-and-so is in love with so-and-so in the office. Those things will always be there. They should not even be an issue. We are looking for real stuff that are business stoppers or business damagers. Sometimes I've gone to CEOs and said, CEO, this is what I got from your whistleblower emails and stories this month. You're not going to touch this and this, just touch this. But the things that the CEO wants to chase are those that are exciting, but not adding any value at all. This is why whistleblowing is something useful, but sometimes it creates unhealthy gossip in an organization. And you need somebody very smart to actually manage it, very confidential. I know so many stories that have been said about people with clients where I process it. I always say, what is it got to do with the business? That's the question. If you go the whistleblower route, make sure that the organization has somebody very mature and responsible handling that aspect. Otherwise, you'll fight amongst yourselves, and you'll dispose of very good men and women. Remember, when I see you here in your organization, you are human capital. In the boards that I sit in or I've sat in, CEOs will tell you one thing, that when it comes to Ndumiso, the last thing you want to go and tell him in a board meeting is to say, I dismissed so many people. Because basically you're telling me you have disposed of my assets. I've invested so money in these assets and you have disposed of them. And I'll grill you. I'll say, bring the guy's file. How much training did we put in this guy? Was this the best solution? You spend the whole meeting on asset disposal when you are disposing of cars and earth-moving equipment. And you spend 10 minutes when you are disposing of a human asset. Sorry, guys. In fact, this is the reason when sometimes I walk into organizations, everybody expects one guy to leave the organization. After I've left, the CEO thinks twice before throwing out the guy. Because I've told him, look beyond this one incident. Right. All supply chain activities must be backed by a detailed standard operating procedures that thread across the organization and must speak to procurement guidelines as well, need to use tried and tested supply chain related software. So all we are saying is the nature of supply chain is that if you are putting together a policy document, at some point you need to get everybody in the organization to come together to say, our interests captured, our risks attended to, our possible gaps attended to, and then make sure the document is quality checked at 2 levels, by your own financial auditors and also checked by a human resources expert. Because those people will be able to tell you where possible gaps are. Because I'm looking at that document, you will have already gone through some of your fraud, internal fraud specialists. Please don't be caught by the sweet tongue of supply chain software suppliers. Go in and check for yourself and talk to those who have used that software. We've seen some of the talk without mentioning them. Massive fraud through filtering through some of the best known software packages, isn't it? Platforms, I won't mention some of those platforms because of for professional reasons. There is a need for solid, detailed code of conduct to easily manage supply chain related misconduct. In your code of conduct, supply chain related misconduct, that is actually there in our history, has it been captured? Or we'll end up using the omnibus clause, which says any act inconsistent with the implied conditions of your contract. Employment contracts must be crafted in such a manner that they reduce fraud and risk loopholes, e.g., address moonlighting and interest disclosure. I will shortly be talking about this to you once again later on. I know with the environment that we are in Zimbabwe, people will say, we all are moonlighting because of the economy. That's what people always tell me. Right. I come to salaries. The problem that we have as a nation at the moment is that we are paying wages and salaries that keep the body and soul together. We are not paying living wages. That's one of the biggest elephants in the room. That's one of the biggest elephants in the room. Paying employees sick wages and salaries opens them to corruption. There was one mining magnate, I will not mention his name. He once had mines here. One time I was negotiating an exit package for one of his senior managers. And he said, Ndumiso, I'm not interested in going to court with this guy. Every man has a price. Go and find the price and pay the price, but make sure you save as much of my money as possible. That's what he said to me. And indeed, the man had a price. And we paid the price and he moved on. Signed a mutual separation agreement. He was happy for what he got, and the employer was happy with what he got. Fine, that was above board, but more often than not, you have a hungry guy. If you read a lot about fraud, the complaint about Asian, I won't mention the countries, about Asian investors, who do they corrupt first? They said, don't corrupt anything else, corrupt the head. Then you're fine. That's what those who have done studies in that area say. The workers create means to extract money from suppliers. The guy who mans your stores with so many assets, your buyer or somebody who handles your key important components, You pay him peanuts. Imbuzi idla imbuzi into zabhaka asungirwa ndithi. Then that's the beginning of corruption. Fraud or corruption chains are created in organizations, and these interface with external corruption chains that are much bigger cartels beyond the employer's ability to control. That's one of our biggest problems in organization. Remember, corruption is just one, not one guy. It becomes an internal chain. But the damage begins when our internal corruption chain interfaces with the massive external corruption chain. Then you'll definitely be Guptaized. This is, to me, we can talk about everything else. 3 is the biggest, maybe, challenge for your conference up to the end, to say, how do you deal with this chain? The internal chain versus the external chain. And once these two chains hook, remember the external chain is hooked to company A, is hooked to company B, is hooked to company C. And it's a massive, bigger chain. So your own organization is a very small player in a big field. And at some point, everybody in your internal line will actually be intimidated by the external link. And then bigger problems begin. You start getting goods coming from China, but they are invoiced in Mauritius. That sounds too familiar, isn't it? Already middlemen. Get a problem with that item and phone Mauritius. You'll see the stories that emerge from them. To me, 3 is the big one. The Zimbabwean environment, the painful truth. Sometimes board members don't like this slide. I've shared it several times, and many board members don't like it. Few employees earn a living wage. That's the first thing. Many employees survive on moonlighting and side businesses. Domestic worker today earns $100, which is between 75 and 85,000 pounds. How much does your tea lady or your cleaner earn at work? Domestic worker has accommodation. He has all her meals, breakfast, lunch, and supper. And they said, I'm not going to work for you for RTGS. I need 100 USD. Your worker will moonlight, sell his other things. Many employees are using employer facilities, equipment, and time to make the extra dollar. She is not just on WhatsApp. She's selling nails during working hours. She's selling perfumes during working hours. He is selling tires during working hours. So many other things that we are selling during our working hours. Remember, when the guy is sitting behind the computer, you can't tell what he's doing. As you come in, he clicks the right window. That's exactly what is happening to us on the ground today. Many employees make the extra cash by corrupt means and exploiting the loopholes in the supply chain. Why don't you talk to the guys at your workplace? You will hear the words, "Undumiso udlayeka. Undumiso ari udlayeka." What are they telling you? Baneburi somewhere. Kunesikhala somewhere when Ndumiso is eating. You'll forgive me, I did both Shona and Ndebele at high school. I'm one of the less privileged ones. Right. Is there anybody who gets lost, which if I throw Ndebele or Shona words, then I forgot to ask? Nobody. Good. So that's where the loopholes, they are always there. They take advantage of those loopholes. The supplier says he is not taking any bank transfer because the bank transfer is 20% of his money. He wants his payment cash. Do you think I'll carry the cash and deliver it and not get a cut myself? Unless someone was a unless I'm asking these questions that relate to what we are corrupting. RTGS salaries in an almost 80% dollarized economy drive employees to search for the USD in corrupt means to fund USD needs of families. The truth of it, my schoolmate doesn't like me saying it, but he will forgive me. 80% of, in fact not 80%, rural areas in Zimbabwe have almost 100% dollarized. Am I lying, guys? They don't take your eco cash. They don't take your bond. It doesn't matter. I turned over into Renko, stopped at a shop. They said, we only take the USD and the rand. I went to plant to the villages out there around Guanyan. They said, your bond only works on the what? On the main road there when you get the order fit to plant. But you get the order fit guy says, I no longer take the bond. I've still taking the bond. I've said, we are running dishonest businesses. Why am I saying dishonest businesses? If I'm telling the truth that the economy is 80% dollarized, transport for your workers is in US dollars. Medicine at the farmers is in US dollars. Nobody has accommodation payable in what? In RTGS. No domestic worker will accept to be paid in what? RTGS. Those of you who have rural homes or have got plots in the village, those guys will not take the RTGS. But there you are loading your poor guy with the RTGS. And the only thing he's going to do is to find a place where he can sell that RTGS for those who are paying statutory payments. But again, I've said, as a nation, when we go and pay statutory payments in RTGS, we know we are shooting ourselves in the foot, isn't it? Because one day our government will be on its knees because of that, and you will still have to pay for that damage. Well, that's a story for another day. But for today, I'm saying, you should remember that you are paying an employee who actually needs more of the US dollar than the RTGS in order to live. Because almost all his inputs are in USD. Fuel, those with cars. Then, some cases, I'm almost at the end, some cases, the corruption fraud is driven by the CEO and senior managers, thus making it hard to manage it at lower levels. Some of you in this room have bent your fingers where you have put them, where the boss's interests are. You only see yourself being transferred to another department, and you wonder what has hit you. Watambira Pasiri, CEOs don't like me saying this, but that's the truth. Look at some of their lifestyles. He is a procurement manager, but he is the one who sends people and tells the procurement guy to say, consider so and so and so and so. What does that mean? What choices do you have if you are in procurement when the boss has already pronounced who should be considered? One guy in procurement said, Spanda, if that happens, but right, let's move on. Secondly, at times some board members are the drivers of fraudulent activities where they have influence on some tenders. I think this we've seen so many times in our newspapers, isn't it? Right, what then is the way out? Can we sanitize compensation and manage out-fraud related risk? The board of directors must be driven by employee compensation, must drive employee compensation by having a solid and flexible remuneration chart. Talk to boards of directors about putting together a remuneration chart. Many of them don't want to hear about that. Why? Because it will regulate a lot of loopholes where money will actually be siphoned by themselves. Boards of directors, in particular remuneration committees, must not be manned by non-professional fingers. And in quotation, destitute board members. It's a very harsh criticism. You have the chairman of the remuneration committee who has never seen a salary survey in his life, who has never seen a payroll in his life, who does not understand the dynamics of managing a payroll, who does not understand compensation principles. Even if you offer to say, can you go and be trained, they don't come. They only walk in to get their sitting allowance. A few minutes later, Wamka emerges. Seham is going. Who do I call destitute board members? There is a board member after being appointed to a board who celebrates that is now going to earn a living. He creates so many meetings and committees so that he appears at work 5-10 times a month in order to get an allowance. Some of you, if you ask HR managers and finance guys, they will tell you some of the board members are a sad story. Because as soon as he comes out of the board meeting, he drives the car. Those are the big questions that arise. People talk of fraud on the sides, but they leave the big elephant in the room. Just deal with the boards. Because if the board is made of what did I call those fingers? Non-professional fingers, then we have a problem. The compensation program must be guided by professional salary surveys. Periodic compensation reviews must be done, guided by affordability and maintaining wages and salaries and benefits for employees, irrespective of what the NECs have done for graded employees. However, such payments must be legally secured against abuse by unions in the future. What I'm saying is, for non-managerial employees, if you give them a salary increase, there must always be a rider to say, in the event the NEC gives the higher salary, this amount will be factored in. If you don't do that, you'll have an explosive payroll. Lastly, employers can also respond by giving benefit mixes that help reduce the risk of necessity fraud. I call it necessity fraud. I'm not sanitizing in people, but I called it necessity in connections for survival. I was very careful, that's why I put it in connection. What is the necessity fraud? They want fuel for their children. They want children's fees, they want medication and transport assistance. They will steal from you if you don't manage your payroll properly. Lastly, above all, fraud and risk management rests with the quality of board of directors and how ethical and effectively they perform their oversight role, in particular their handling supply chain management policies. That's where we belong. How far has your board signed off the supply chain management policies? That's the question. You'll find the board doesn't even know the policy. There is no policy document. In conclusion, despite having all the best systems and conditions of service, there are always directors and employees driven by greed and have to be managed out legally, as reckless dismissal can be caused. It doesn't matter what you do. There are some people who just agreed by the end. We can't stop them, but we have to manage them out. Standard audits are also a helpful tool. Unfortunately, my experience with forensic audits has been that most cannot stand the legal scrutiny. Thus, in my opinion, they are of limited value. I've had people calling forensic audits. Remember the NASA one? I can talk about that NASA one. You remember? The judge tore it to pieces. Even the problem with the forensic audit is that the first word, it says this is not an audit. I mean, how then do you marshal that in before a judge? Already, you are already dealing with a legally hopeless document because you can't call it a what? An audit. And from there, the integrity of the very people who actually did the forensic audit will actually come to question because they are already at a disadvantage. I do the job every day. The forensic auditor comes and asks me questions. I'll give him answers that save me. And when we go to court, I release the detail that he didn't bring up, and the judge will realize that this audit was hopeless. I'm not saying forensic audits are entirely useless, but I'm saying they are the last thing you want to take before a judge. I've been embarrassed 4 times legally, and I don't want to take those things back to the judges. Because the first thing the judge reads is, this is not an audit. And the moment you start telling a judge this is just an opinion, how do we move on? Gentlemen and ladies, or ladies and gentlemen, my story ends here. Not because I would definitely ask to be excused. My basket is a little bit full as we are heading for the holidays.
Maybe before you leave, Mr. Mother, any questions, ladies and gentlemen? We can take 2 or more questions. Yes, please.
I've got a question just to do with the Zimbabwean scenario that you painted. We find that I've come across many organizations, perhaps in response to the prevailing economic conditions, actively encourage their employees to run their own businesses, perhaps to supplement their income. And at times you find that some of the employees even become suppliers to the organization. So the issues that probably you're raising in terms of these issues sort of kick in. Sometimes it becomes difficult to apply best standards, to ensure that certain activities are done on an arm's length basis. So in your view, is such a scenario sustainable? Where you find that maybe the generality of staff probably are also suppliers to the company. How do you do it? Is it sustainable? That's my biggest concern.
If I am to borrow from one author, our economy where it is, the biggest challenge is that ethics are dwarfed by the occasion. I don't know whether it makes sense. What is happening is much bigger than ethical conduct expected of people. And when such things happen, it's usually every organization for itself, and it's a survival game. And in the survival game, You win some, you lose some. That is the painful truth. Because where we are, ethics are dwarfed by the occasion. If you have to ask lawyers, if you have to ask judges, if you have to ask, which I shouldn't be saying, but the truth of it is that our ethics in a number of things that we are doing in organizations are dwarfed by the occasion. And all we are asking the government to do is to take us back to an ethical trading environment. That's all really we are urging, and we are praying that one time our government will swing us back to that occasion where I will tell my worker not to moonlight. You know, now I get pained when my workers sell nails and I see somebody coming to collect nails during working hours. It's my good worker. But do I demoralize her to say, please, I don't want this? So that's my answer to his painful question.
Any more questions? I hope you have an answer.
Things that maybe you haven't asked me to talk about, but which actually tends to mitigate us against some of the pain that we see in offices. Restructure your workplace and allow some employees to work from home. They will be then free to mix business and their own things. And then you put a mechanism to manage deliverables. You'll still get your deliverables, but the employee will be also doing his other things. And a lot of those that have taken that route, working from home model, they've discovered that they've avoided conflict with workers over the other things that the workers do, but they still get the results. That's an option that you can consider. Good people, I was a teacher before. I can talk until the cows come. Thank you.
Surrender. We have learned quite a lot, and I guess as people leave this city, they're going back to their offices for a quite a good remuneration. That's my main point that I got there. At least you need to be paid, right? And I think as my colleagues as well, let's not go into fraudulent activities. Let's discuss about salaries as well, so that we can also curb this whole fraud and other risks. Let's discuss with our employers. Let's talk to them about salaries. I think I got it from this presentation. I hope we're going to talk to our employers on that particular case so that we get assisted. And also minimize this whole supply chain being said over and over in terms of fraud and in terms of kickbacks and all of that. Thank you so much, Seth. We learned a lot. We really appreciate it. Let's give him a round of applause.